We now have the president's report. So Les, if I can turn it over to you.
Дякую, Ганю. Як знаєте, наша робота зосереджена на трьох пріоритетах. Це є підтримка України, відзначення та просування нашої українсько-канадської ідентичності та розвиток нашої спільноти. Але з огляду на війну наш головний пріоритет зараз це є підтримка перемоги України. І в цьому напрямку ми координуємо звернення до політиків і канадської громадськості, щоб забезпечити потужну підтримку Канади для захисту України від геноцидної війни Росії. We conducted very recently, on October 21st, a very successful advocacy day on the Hill. We had over 50 representatives, including our youth ambassadors, who descended on Parliament Hill like a well-oiled machine. The participants were briefed the day before, and priorities and talking points were reviewed. We did a little bit of role-playing. And the Embassy of Ukraine hosted a reception on Sunday evening, and Ambassador Kovalyou motivated our delegates with an inspirational talk. The following day, we met with over 50 members of parliament from all parties. We also met with the Prime Minister, who devoted 45 minutes to our meeting. This is unprecedented attention to our community. We also met with the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, and several cabinet ministers. The advocacy focus was on three priorities. Although we have many priorities, advocacy rules tell you that you have to identify your top three priorities. And those were providing Ukraine with more assistance, taking stronger measures against Russia, and continuing the support for Ukrainians who are in Canada. So we would like to make this an annual event, and we encourage you to join us next year. Several of our board members were there with us a couple of weeks ago, and we thank you for making the trip to Ottawa and making this a wonderful experience for everyone. And most of all, I thank our staff, whose professionalism and expertise made us very proud that day. We achieved a few milestones in the past year. Of course, the modernized Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement received royal assent in March. Minister Mary Ng, the Minister of International Trade to Ukraine, led a trade mission to Ukraine in July to commemorate the signing of this important agreement with her Ukrainian counterparts. Zenko Potichny and I were part of the delegation, which also included representatives of the Canadian defense sector, because this is the highest priority for Ukraine now. Ukraine is seeking investment from Canada to develop and grow its domestic defense sector, and that would be a win-win for Canada and Ukraine. As we all know, there is a shortage of supply of ammunition, long lines for production of other missiles and defense systems. And so the sooner Ukraine can grow its own capacity, the safer we will be. In September, Ihor Mikhalchishin and Marichka Bokonya participated in the Ukraine Action Summit in Washington. That was organized by Razom, Nova Ukraina, and other Ukrainian American associations. There were over 500 participants on the Hill in Washington, including, very importantly, non-Ukrainian allies. They help spread the word and demonstrate support for Ukraine in Washington. This liaison will now expand our network and facilitate cross-border cooperation between our diasporas. And in addition to that, just this week, UCC participated in the Peace Formula Ministerial Conference in Montreal, which focused on bringing back Ukraine's children, civilians, and prisoners of war from Russian captivity. The work of UCC in support of Ukraine was recognized by both the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister in their remarks to the media. And on the sidelines of the summit, our Quebec UCC branch, led by Mikhailo Shvets, organized a meeting with Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha and Irina Vereshchuk from President Zelensky's office. Moving on to our other policy recommendations. Of course, I've already mentioned the provision of weapons to Ukraine, ongoing needs for economic and humanitarian assistance, the designation of Russia as a state supporter of terrorism, the expulsion of all Russian diplomats from Canada, and the implementation of a full trade embargo on Russia. In that direction, we continue our daily work of briefing members of parliament and government officials. We appear before parliamentary committees and keep the public informed through a series of communications, press releases, webinars, and briefings. There isn't a day that goes by where we're not issuing some form of communication. Our milestones this year were as previously mentioned, the modernization of the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. And there you'll see the summary of the funding that Canada has provided in various aspects for the support of Ukraine. Canada was instrumental in securing a G7 $50 billion loan that will be secured by the interest from the frozen Russian assets in the West. Canada is contributing $5 billion towards that effort. And of course, Deputy Prime Minister Freeland was a leader in designing and conceiving of this mechanism and getting buy-in from the other G7 countries and the EU. We also saw the signing of the agreement on the Canada-Ukraine Strategic Security Partnership. This was signed in Ukraine by Prime Minister Trudeau and President Zelensky on the anniversary of the second full-scale invasion. And this, of course, deepens the security relationship between Canada and Ukraine and allocated over $3 billion of support for Ukraine. In February 2024, we observed the second anniversary, an anniversary that we hoped we would not see, but it was the second anniversary of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. In Canada, we had over 40 events across the country. This is an indication of the support for Ukraine that we see across Canada. And of course, another sad anniversary that we will be commemorating on November 19th, and that is the 1000th day of Russia's full-scale invasion. And we'll be sending materials to you shortly. This will be a commemoration that will be observed across all Ukrainian diasporas around the world. We have also been continue to work with the Canada-Ukraine Foundation on the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, which to date has raised over $69 million in cash or monetary donations. Approximately 65 million of that has been dispersed, and there was another 20 million of in-kind donations that were received and dispersed to Ukraine. The humanitarian aid appeal has impacted over 5 million people in Ukraine, and the most recent campaign, which is the winterization campaign, has raised over $2.3 million with the generous assistance of the Mehal Family Foundation. And this aid will be directed towards supplying Ukrainians with wood-burning stoves, power banks, power generators, bedding, food, and winter clothing and shelter for internally displaced persons, all to help Ukrainians get through yet another very cold winter, which has been, the situation is getting worse and worse as Russia continues to bomb infrastructure, and the transmission of electricity is jeopardized with every bombing. We also continue our support for over 300,000 Ukrainians who have arrived in Canada under the QIT visa. We continue to work with the government to ensure continued support from governments across the country, provincial and federal, and to continue the assistance that our community provides. We have asked the government for an extension of the QIT visa for an additional 2 years, and hopefully we will not need to seek any further extensions. On the domestic front, the Ukrainian Heritage Month bill was introduced in the Senate by Senator Stan Kucher, who the bill has passed the committee stage and will come back to the Senate floor very soon, after which we'll take it to the House of Commons. On a happier note, we celebrated another Vishivanka Day on May 16th. And again, there were 23 events across Canada from coast to coast to coast. In November of last year, we commemorated the 90th anniversary of the Holodomor. Events were held across Canada and on Parliament Hill, and the Awareness Committee organized a Shine a Light campaign. This year, the Holodomor Memorial Day will take place on November 23rd, the last Saturday of every November. We also commemorated the 80th anniversary of the genocide of the Crimean Tatar people. In 2022, Canada recognized the 1944 deportation of the Crimean Tatar people as an act of genocide and established May 18th as Crimean Tatar Genocide Memorial Day. On October 28th, we marked National Internment Commemoration Day, and this year the committee expanded its education campaign, encouraging the use of resources that are available online, including on our website for both elementary and secondary students. These resources align with Canadian curriculum standards and include lessons, documents, videos, and more. And of course, as we just heard from Taras Yatsky, work continues on the Ukrainian Sacrifice Medal. This is a most important initiative, and I add my congratulations to the members of the committee who have worked to make this a reality. As you all are aware, there's a public inquiry into foreign interference. We have full standing before that committee. We are fortunate to be represented by very experienced counsel, Don Bain and John Duty, whose fees are funded by the inquiry. I testified at the committee in early October and spoke about Russian interference, which has not received the kind of attention that one would expect before this commission of inquiry. We are often eclipsed by activities of the Indian government, Chinese government, but it's important to emphasize the malign Russian interference that is directed at our community and the broader Canadian public. And we urge the committee and the government of Canada to take Russian interference and all forms of foreign interference more seriously. In addition to my appearance, Ihor Michalchishin and Oris Zakidaiski gave testimony in June to Commission Council, and the Commission also organized an in-camera roundtable with our community representatives. The final submissions will be delivered to Commissioner Og next week, and she is scheduled to publish her report by the end of the year. I also appeared before the House Public Safety and Security Committee, which is conducting hearings on Russian interference in Canada. And we are hopeful that both Justice Og and the House Committee will recommend that the government take stronger action in response to Russian interference campaigns. In the 1980s, as you all know, you have heard me speak about this, our community spent a considerable amount of time and resources defending Ukrainian Canadians from allegations of collective war criminality. Today, we are once again having to fight the same specious allegations. Our community has once again been subjected to a familiar disinformation narrative smearing Ukrainians, which originated from the Soviet Union and is now being continued by its successor state, Russia. This disinformation campaign succeeded in duping the Mulroney government into establishing the Deschênes Commission of Inquiry into War Criminals. But through the efforts of the Civil Liberties Commission led by John Grigorovich and the superb advocacy of the late John Supinka, who was our counsel, we were able to refute these spurious allegations made by Saul Littman, Simon Wiesenthal, and other organizations in Canada, that Canada was a haven for thousands of war criminals. Justice Deschênes examined every case that was submitted to him and found that in all but 29 cases, the allegations were unfounded and there was no evidence of war criminality or any other wrongdoing on the part of these individuals who were unfairly denounced. This included the Divizia Halitshina. In his ruling, Justice Deschênes wrote that in view of the nature of this inquiry, my report is divided into two parts. Part 1, which is designed for publication, and Part 2, which is destined to remain confidential. And yet, almost 40 years later, the Russian disinformation machine continues to work. And once again, the Canadian government is being asked by the same players who weren't successful before the Deschênes Commission to reveal the names that Justice Deschênes ordered closed. The revelation of these names would subject thousands of innocent Canadians, including the family members and descendants of those who were investigated without their knowledge and without any finding of guilt against them. They would be subjected to the kind of public scorn and vigilantism that was visited upon Mr. Yaroslav Hunka. If and when the government makes a decision, we are ready to apply to the federal court to challenge the government's authority to overrule Justice Deschênes' order on confidentiality. So thank you to everyone who participated in our campaign to raise funds for this very important court challenge, and we will keep you informed of next steps. Again, on a happier note, we are growing our community leadership. Our Youth Ambassador Program was launched in March of 2024. This first cohort includes 21 accomplished young people from 8 provinces and the Yukon. Each youth ambassador is supported by a representative from their local UCC branch and a mentor. In September, they began work in skill-building modules, which were delivered by field experts. They also participated, as I have mentioned, in our Youth Advocacy Day. The UCC has identified as a priority the need for more Ukrainian schools to support the new communities that have formed in Canada since 2022. To that end, the National Ukrainian Education Council held their conference for Ukrainian educators on June 15th. The conference was themed Ukrainian Education in Canada, New Realities and New Innovations. It brought together over 100 participants from Canada, Germany, Georgia, the US, Ireland, Austria, Ukraine, Poland, France, and the UK. Once again, the UCC shows its leadership not only in Canada, but throughout our diaspora in promoting Ukrainian education. And we continue to grow. This year, we added 4 new branches to our family. In March, we welcomed the Ukrainian Association of Fredericton. In May, the Ukrainian Cultural Organization of Newfoundland and Labrador joined us. And in October, we welcomed the Waterloo Wellington branch from Ontario and the Ukrainian Canadian Association in Yukon in Whitehorse. Serdecznie was всіх вітаємо. We also continue our parliamentary internship program, which continues to give back. Many graduates of this program have sought careers in the civil service, and the more contacts we have in the civil service, the easier it is for us to continue our advocacy work. This year, Andriy Hrinko serves as our UCC intern, and he is placed in the office of New Democrat MP Jenny Kwan. In terms of what we are building towards, in February of 2025, Team Ukraine will participate in the Invictus Games in British Columbia, and our UCC branch is working actively to organize various elements of the hospitality and welcome that we will demonstrate to our Team Ukraine. We are also in very active planning stages for the Triennial Congress, which will take place from November 13th to 16th, 2025 in Toronto. And of course, none of our work would be possible without all of you. We are truly the envy of every ethnic group in Canada, but we must at the same time remember to reach out to our fellow Ukrainian Canadians who are also the victims of many tragedies around the world today. So I'm grateful for the daily support of our executive committee. This is an incredible group of people without whose advice we would not have the effect and impact that we do. I want to say a special thank you to Kasian Sultikavich, who recently left us, I assume temporarily only, as he welcomed his new baby daughter, Mnoha Elito Kasiane Ichrestiu. And of course, our board of directors, you are many and talented, and I know that you do amazing work around the country. We also benefit from the advice of an advisory council, Mr. James Temerte and Ihor Ignatovich, again, who provide us with sage advice and whom I can turn to at any time for counsel and assistance. We are also blessed with very dedicated presidents of our provincial councils, and we thank you again and again. And of course, we have many branches and presidents of those branches who enrich our work. And of course, we have many active committees. Many of you are present here today, and we hear from you regularly at our board meetings. And finally, a thank you to our generous donors, without whom we could not do the work that we do. And I would now like to ask Ihor, to thank Ihor for the incredible work that our staff does. And if I can ask you to present our staff, and they can take a well-deserved bow and round of applause from all of us.
Дякую, Лесю. So in order of the list here, working in Ottawa is Orisa Kadaisky, Senior Policy Advisor. We have also in Ottawa, Tara Katusiak-Baran, our Public Affairs Advisor. Marichka Bukovnya, our Outreach Program Coordinator. And Mariana Sauka, our Youth Ambassador Program Manager. As always, heading up our office and team in Winnipeg, Lasya Dimkovich is our administrator, and Zoila Tellis is our part-time accounts manager. In Toronto now, we have our remote team in Toronto, Yana Nechaporuk and Anastasia Lazarchuk, that are in Toronto. And in Mount Bridges, just outside of London, Ontario, Lasya Skiba, our fundraising fund development manager. So it is some people work full-time, a few part-time, and we're also going to be, as we get closer to the Congress, looking for others to join on a part-time basis. We are a small team, but we ride mighty. And as you saw, as many saw during the Advocacy Day, we can be very proud of all of our staff who go always above and beyond to support you, our executive, our board, our branches, and we're available around the clock for any question we can help answer, any support we can offer.
Дякую, Ігор.